Hey, look who's finally awake. What, do you not remember? Why are you looking at me like that? The tickets? The tickets to Train World? We're in Train World right now, riding a train, which is what you do in Train World. I'm right here. Relax. Hey, check out this movie I just watched. Here, I'll put it in the disc tray for you. So if you don't mind, I'm actually gonna just talk at you about the movie we just watched. You know, Legend of Bigfoot, 1976, directed by Ivan Marks. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your conductor speaking. We will now be playing some jazz. I have a great love of films. There, I said it. And I'm not talking exclusively of Criterion level, Siskel and Ebert style, well reviewed films. I love it when it's shot on film, on tape, on an iPhone, shot in IMAX. It really doesn't matter if there are physical cameras involved at all. I want to see it. Film as an artistic medium has a certain personal quality that is immediately detectable, or, in the same coin, undetectable, upon viewing, much like a well-written piece of literature. That is to say, when the people in every possible orientation in respect to the camera who are working on it, be it in front of or behind, care about what is being made. If they care, that will come through in the film. That will be displayed. You'll see that heart that's been poured out into the creation of the film. Two titans of the internet age, B-movie mythos, create a perfect contrast in my mind when it comes to the idea of being genuine and really being earnest and honest with your work. Those films being one, on one hand, Birdemic, Shock and Terror, and then Sharknado. We're going to ignore the sequels to both of these films. Birdemic has a sequel, of course. Sharknado has a series of sequels. But we're just looking at the first installments of these series right now. To me, Birdemic feels very genuine in its lack of production quality, while Sharknado reeks of corporate cash-in. It's underproduced. It's a snorefest, which started with a few big names from a decade or more before it was made. These some would call washed-up stars, some would call less desirable. A comedian like Norm Macdonald may call them box office poison. But in any case, you can tell that there is a certain gumption and go-get-'em kind of tenacity from director James Nguyen, and you can see that come through in Birdemic, despite the amateurish quality of the production. But you know what? It's alright to be an amateur. It's good to be an amateur. Nobody comes out hot to trot immediately when they pick up a camera for the first time, or anything else for that matter. You've got to cut your teeth and make sure you want to make whatever you want to make, right? And when you can make it, you want to do it in whatever way you can with whatever you got as well as you can. That's all we can really ask for. Sharknado, on the other hand, has good-looking CGI. That is, it's well-designed. It very clearly isn't slapdash. And it's designed to look kind of quote-unquote bad, which really feels like they're punching down on people who may not have, let's say, 18 visual effects artists, 6 stunt coordinators, 14 staff in the art department, and a seemingly infinite number of credited background actors. Right, so don't get it twisted. This is not a jab at any of the hardworking people who got this film out of the door. Right, a film that is, on all accounts, pretty well received by the general public that certainly met the goal of the project. Right, my commentary is more aimed at the notion that these comparatively huge studios are aping off of the genuine success of a movie that was made as a real expression of a single artist, in the case of Birdemic's James Nguyen, writer, director, cameraman, CGI department, etc. Which, by the way, hey, just between you and us, Uh, James Nguyen has a more recent film titled The Man with the Wooden Face, came out in 2017. Tell everyone you know. I'm not going to say anything else about it. Maybe I'll do a video on it. Who cares? I don't know. This brings us, of course, to the film that you've definitely just watched. You definitely stopped to watch The Legend of Bigfoot. I believe you, but hey, don't worry. I'm going to avoid major and specific spoilers. My goal here is really to paint a picture of the film and talk about it in a way that will hopefully entice you to watch it if you haven't stopped to watch it. I really do recommend you do stop to watch it. A lot of the things I'm going to describe are more fun to experience on your own, in my opinion. So, we'll see how far that goes. So honestly, if you're worried about spoilers, no worries. Consider this your life now, and enjoy the ride. The Legend of Bigfoot was directed by Harry Weiner. Please do not laugh. It's pronounced like a glass of wine. Wine-er, not wiener. Not Harry Weiner. Please do not laugh, and do not call him Harry Weiner. Harry has 50 directorial attributions and is still involved in film production in some capacity or another to this very day. As of the recording of this, he actually has one whole thing in the works. It looks like some kind of project. Looks neat. Go check that out on your own. I'm not going to talk about it much here. But, come to find out, Legend of Bigfoot is actually his directorial debut, at least credited. I refrained from doing any research on the film before watching it, as I think it really should kind of be that way, right? Unless there's some sort of medical or other form of accessibility reason, you should really try and go into a film as blind as walking into a movie theater and picking your ticket by the poster alone. That is, again, in my opinion, speaking of my opinion, and something I should probably warn you about, just in case if you haven't stopped when I was berating you in the last section there about watching the movie, right? If you were uncomfortable with the filming of hunting and nature and kind of natural violence, some scenes may cause you discomfort. Even if you are not specifically kind of opposed to these kinds of scenes, there is a lot of depictions of fairly heavy topics and themes and visuals that can be at times not grotesque. It's not a giallo film. It's not trying to blow your mind. It's not a complete grindhouse film, right? But it is something that shows honestly what nature looks like in a very blunt kind of way. Right? And I think it's important to see it. I think it's intentional and thematically linked to the narrative, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think it's worth seeing, but that is a warning. Obviously, I put a warning earlier. Just be warned, right? Some of these films, especially the ones I'll look at, aren't always going to be things that definitely went into mainstream movie theaters. So now, kind of onto the film. The first impression this movie left on me was from its aesthetic and its presentation. We'll begin with the beginning, and then when we get to the end, we'll stop. The opening narration, delivered by our protagonist, Ivan Marks, who, by the way, also serves as the film's cinematographer, which we'll continue to get into as we speak more about him. He appears in front camera, speaking as himself about the serious and true nature of what he is about to show. Little do we know, unless you heeded my previous disclaimer, that he's not joking. I mean, of course he is joking in a way, right? But he's also not joking. Right? Films of this era have a certain rawness about them that I find almost addictive. And this rawness doesn't always have to be intentionally over the top and shocking, like John Waters' 1972 porno chic classic, Pink Flamingos. Right? That's a movie that is trying to turn you off, and what this is doing is not that. But it does feature the same kind of amateurish rawness, but we'll get into that later. The Legend of Bigfoot captures a beautiful landscape, right? It's filled with flora and fauna, of which our protagonist Ivan knows all about, which is good, right? We're given a good character to follow through this story who is knowledgeable and really helps us as the viewer walk through the same steps that he and Bigfoot are walking through. He is a tracker by trade, right? In his own words, he says he tracks renegades, of course referring to renegade animals, things with rabies, etc., killers of livestock, and sometimes people, which is foreboding, right? However, Ivan also says he confesses that he does not enjoy hunting for sport because he finds it wasteful. right? And I think this is where we see one of the large thematic webs of this film, right? It's an absolute classic thematic idea, man versus nature, right? Which is intertwined with fate, right? Nature and fate. We can kind of think of these as things out of our control as humankind, right? And of the three archetypal stories, the others being, of course, man versus man, which is intertwined with society, right? What is society but a group of humans? And man versus self, right? It's the royal we, the humans of Earth. So we're talking about all of mankind here. There are, of course, bleed over from the other archetypal stories, as there so often are, but nature is our true antagonist in the film, if you can really even call it that. Nature is more of an obstacle, but also a relic of time long past, not to be trifled with. Ivan is respectful of nature, and it's clear that he, as a cinematographer, really loves nature. We get an amazing set of wide shots right alongside damn near and sometimes better than National Geographic quality reference footage of animals, all shot by Ivan Marks and the team creating the film. Ivan Marks was a tracker himself in real life, of course, as he plays himself in the film, and we really get to see the entire film and the entire Bigfoot hunting structure through his lens. Pun intended. Let's change gears for a minute. Instead of talking about the composition of the film, let's talk about the narrative structure of the film. Right, the narrative, which is about hunting Bigfoot, this is not a spoiler, by the way, is driven forward by narration via Ivan, and it's often overlaid atop the nature footage. They captured a lot of great nature ambiance throughout and made a really smart decision to not try and record vocal dialogue or monologue in the outdoors. Right, I can only imagine that the equipment at that time in '76 would have been too unwieldy for a relatively small team with a small budget to handle in these rough conditions. However, the score by Don Peake, who is a Motown guitarist, the first white guitarist to play with the Ray Charles Orchestra, among many other accomplishments throughout his career. He really carries a lot of emotional weight throughout the film with his score that, honestly, silence or just ambiance wouldn't have held quite the same way. The Legend of Bigfoot had, depending on how they shot it, high single-digit to low double-digit numbers of people on set at any given time, in my rough estimation. Right, we get amazing camera work, presumably done largely by Ivan himself when not on camera. In many instances, we get rare handheld shots that look really nice for the era, and they read perfectly when on the screen. In 1976, handheld shots in films were not quite where they are, especially now, but they do a great job in this film getting all of the cinematography correct along with the narrative and linking them all in thematic ways, typically through Ivan and his understanding and love of nature. Something that is unfortunately not a rare sight in films from this era is footage of real animal deaths, which, while disturbing and uncomfortable, are not inherently exploitative in this film. This is no cannibal holocaust. The only fictitious element in the film is the monkey costume wearing actors impersonating a famed cryptid. The Legend of Bigfoot is not afraid to really show nature unreserved, and honestly much to the film's credit and benefit. I can understand why many would not want to witness this needlessly, but it is a sobering reminder that we are just mean. I have a quote from Mark Twain, it's kind of kicking around my head. The symbol of the race ought to be a human being carrying an axe. For every human being has one concealed about him somewhere, and is always seeking the opportunity to grind it. This adventure to track and study Bigfoot brings us all around the North American territories, from Wyoming to the Yukon and even all the way to the Arctic Circle, all shot on 16mm, printed on 35mm, and absolutely crunched down into a terrible digital format. What I wouldn't give to watch a true reel of this movie. However, despite the somewhat rough state of the film, even on archive.org, it is still a great filmmaking spectacle in my opinion. The film maintains an unflinching documentary style as it progresses. The story beats are bridged by an excellent narration delivered by Ivan Marks himself, which utilizes his inner monologue to help us through his thought process and strategy for finding Bigfoot. And in an absolutely stunning and smile-inducing move, Ivan is not looking to kill Bigfoot. This journey is purely scientific and of personal curiosity and interest for Ivan. Okay, well, let's not talk about the monkey costumed man for just a moment. because there's a fair bit of polarization from critics of this film, as Ivan, of course the cinematographer and lead, treats what looks like intentionally faked and conveniently timed Bigfoot appearances throughout the film as gospel truth. Some agree with Ivan and some don't. I personally don't think it matters when it comes to enjoying the film, because it didn't ever cross my mind that this may be real in any capacity, even when it was said to me explicitly by the protagonist / cinematographer of the film, who wants me to believe him. I do like the idea of a crowd full of unsure patrons leaving a theater, not knowing if it was real or fake. It reminds me of the Blair Witch Project and its viral ad campaign before it was really a thing for films or really a thing at all. Blair Witch had a lot of firsts and is a solid film, but it definitely benefited from the extra dimension that the advertising gave it. On the same coin, I think having a little bit more skepticism and maybe a little bit more willingness to drop your defenses and give in to the movie's absurdity and kind of get into its universe, that will add a lot to your viewing experience. Something else that really surprised me and left a big impression was the amount of Bigfoot sightings in the film. Honestly, too many of these Bigfoot and other cryptozoological tales are too scarce on the monster sightings. Each one of the major 4 Bigfoot encounters in the film plays out differently enough to keep you thoroughly engaged during the brisk hour and 14-minute runtime or hour 24-minute special edition runtime, which really doesn't add a whole lot. Frankly, you could really watch either. You're not losing a whole lot. Alongside Bigfoot, as there often is, lies many stories and myths within each narrative. Right, you have to treat each Bigfoot film as its own universe, making its own sorts of rules that you have to keep in mind for the duration of the film. Right, this is much like comparing the Universal Studios vampire classic with Bela Lugosi as Dracula, in, of course, many motion pictures, of which all the rules change constantly. In the Hammer films, Christopher Lee's Grindhouse Dracula epic saga, right, they may both be vampires, they may both be Dracula, but they're sure not the same Dracula. Right, and this is something that's way more common than I think the general film-going audience is aware of. You know, honestly, with the proper amount of buy-in and suspension of disbelief, The Legend of Bigfoot should be considered one of the best Bigfoot documentary films, if not for statistic and scientific content, then for its beautiful wildlife cinematography and dedication to their goal of creating a convincingly real environment, in which something as seemingly ridiculous as Bigfoot, Sam Squanch, whatever you want to call it, may live. The pace is brisk, and I didn't feel as if it dragged significantly in any unintended way. I haven't mentioned Ivan's wife Peggy at all, who plays herself, or the various unnamed compatriot trappers that Ivan is seen with at several points in the film. I really like that the story and the focus of the film is very directly on the journey and thought process and methods of Ivan hunting searching for Bigfoot. Right, in my mind, because we get it through this hero's narrative lens, right, he feels like a folk hero by the end of the story, and you really root for him the whole way through. In my mind, Ivan has joined the ranks of legends like Paul Bunyan and John Henry, in terms of American mythology. And at least it is, for me, enjoyable. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and would absolutely recommend it to anyone who is willing to watch a Bigfoot movie from the 1970s. Also known as The Only People I Want to Know. Hey, thanks for listening to me ramble on about a Bigfoot movie from 1976. If you want more of this content, comment, let me know. If you have any movies that, hey, you might want me to see. Not that I don't have a giant list already, but I'm always down for viewer suggestions. Check out the website. Go on any of our social media. Post on Twitter fairly frequently. Mostly just post interesting things and inane thoughts. Maybe the ramblings of a madman. It really depends on if it's scribbled on Twitter or scribbled on a wall with feces. It's really the only difference, isn't it?